Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And sorry, we're starting a few minutes late. Um, so I want to get through and just get on with the building as quickly as possible. But firstly, a quick introduction to me and Create With. So my name is Kieran. I'm one of the founders of Create With. We host these webinars, but primarily we are a community, both online and offline. We host in-person conferences in the UK and meetups all around the world. And we also have an online community based on Slack where basically non-technical people, of which I identify as one of those, get together and we learn how to build software using not code, so visual development tools, and more recently AI to write the code. The reason we are doing this now is because for the longest time, uh, building software has been restricted to a very small proportion of people. And there are roughly 27 million coders in the whole world, and that's an enormous amount of power to put in the hands of a very small number of people. Um, as you know, there are around 8 billion people in the world, and we estimate that around 1.5 billion of these people are technically curious, and that happens to be the number of Excel users. Because I always think if you can build an Excel spreadsheet or a Google spreadsheet, then you're probably technical enough nowadays to build software. And indeed, there's a lot of similarities between spreadsheets and software. So the reason why this is pertinent now is because if you remember back in the 90s, if you wanted to have a presence on the internet, you needed to learn how to write HTML and put your site up on some server, and it was all quite complicated. And then in the 2000s, some people said, okay, it should be easier than this. So stuff like WordPress and Squarespace and Wix emerged, which enabled you to build websites without needing to know how to code, and they're all drag and drop. But unfortunately, you couldn't build anything that complicated until the 2010s when some clever folks at places like Bubble and Xano, who we're going to be hearing from today, and WeWeb invented no code platforms, which meant you could build actually complex software, but still just using these drag and drop interfaces. So that really opened up the world to a lot of people like me who tried to learn to code, never could get it to stick. But I really wanted to be able to build software. And then, as you probably know, in the last couple of years, we've seen an explosion in the capability of AI to write code and therefore build software just from simple prompts. So you may have heard of tools like Cursor, Claude Code, and Codex. They are some of the leading ones. There's also things like Lovable and Replit. But they basically mean that non-technical people can now build software just from prompts. So today we are going to be combining Cursor, which is a development environment, just an app that runs on your computer for viewing code, with some AI models, probably Claude. And we're also going to be combining it with Xano, which is originally a no-code tool from the 2010s, but it has fitted perfectly into this new AI focused development world. So I'll leave Cameron to explain a bit more of that in a second. But the main thing is that the skills you need to build stuff has drastically reduced to what it is today. So in the 2000s, you needed to know a ton of different stuff to be able to make a application. In the 2010s, when no code came along, you needed to know less things, database structures, workflows, API integrations. But there was still some complexity because you still had to learn quite a lot of stuff, even to understand those things. These days, I really think you just need to have the right mindset. And that is things like curiosity, problem solving, tenacity, just not giving up. As always, building software is a lot to do with debugging things, and a lot of people get overwhelmed when they see stuff they don't understand. I think today's skill set that's the most important thing is just being understanding that you can learn anything you want, especially with the help of AI, and not to be put off by the errors and the bugs that you will inevitably see when you are building things. So today we are going to be building a two-sided marketplace, or I say we, Cameron is going to be building it for us. Traditionally, two-sided marketplaces are one of the more complex apps you can build. It's not like a simple SaaS where you have a user who logs into their account and does one thing. This is actually where you have different types of users who both need to be able to log in. They both have different experiences when they use the app, and then they need to be able to come together and buy and sell their services from each other. So it's more complicated than a typical app that you'd build, but it's also kind of the holy grail for a lot of people in terms of what they want to build. So just the fact that we can get through this type of build in the time we're going to do today is mind blowing, and probably would not have been possible 3 months ago. So we're right on the cutting edge of everything here, and fingers crossed things go well today. But just to let you know, if you do find it overwhelming or you're not able to understand anything, please drop questions in the chat. I will try to either answer them myself or I will ask them to Cameron as he builds. This is going to be slightly more on the technical side of the workshops that we run, just because it is a two-sided marketplace. And realistically, if you want to build a marketplace, you are going to need some technical understanding. But I think just the general process of watching a live build and seeing how Cameron debugs the inevitable errors and issues that come up is going to be really, really insightful. So I would advise you to stick with it and just soak it up, and yeah, then go off and build your own thing. But that's enough from me. I'll hand over to Cameron, who is developer evangelist at Xano, to do an intro and then get started with the live build.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much. Yeah, it's definitely an awesome, opportunity to be here to show how in this technical space, we don't have to be super technical to build a two-sided marketplace. So we'll be doing that here with Xano. We'll be using Cursor and we'll be using Claude to build all together. Ideally, everything goes perfect and we walk out of here with a two-sided marketplace demo. But if, anything, we're going to be covering how to think and how to build and how to actually approach those kinds of situations. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I can't share my screen yet. Do you mind letting me pull that up? I'm going to go
Yeah,
ahead and give you a
you
quick.
should be able to, but yeah, if you give it a try, and maybe I need to approve something.
Oh, now we can. Sweet. Okay.
Yeah, cool.
Make it wide here. We're going to be building this two-sided marketplace, and we're getting started, well, by just identifying the problem, which is what is the two-sided marketplace. Here, we're a mixture of non-technical and technical people, but we need to still identify exactly what it is that we're trying to do. And what we're trying to do is trying to build an application where two people or two groups can exchange services. So we have this idea, but we don't necessarily know how to go about it. Previously, it was that code. It was having to know exactly what's going on. But now we just need to know in plain English what we want, and we can describe it, and then we can have it for us, and then we can have it hosted on our platform. So when it comes to not only the code, but also the deployments and everything else, Xano is going to make sure that we handle that. So really, the only thing that you'll ever need to do as you're building this two-sided marketplace is just think and type into Claude and approve and make sure that it works. And so that's what we're going to be covering here today. Now we're breaking this down into 4 different buckets. It's where we start, the fundamentals, the who, the when, the where, the what. We're looking at the people. So who are the people that are going to be involved in this? What actions are they going to take? The information or the data, what are we actually going to be using? And then the connections, are we connecting anything? Hopefully we get to the connections part, but here we're at least going to be looking at the people, the actions, and the information, seeing how those all kind of come together. So the people that we're dealing with here today are going to be the service providers and the customers. They're going to make sure that service providers can list their services and customers can look at their services. And we're just going to try and make sure that it works between these two, that they can actually exchange that data. So that's the basis of this two-sided marketplace. So going back to it, these 4 parts, we're going to be taking a look at the people, the actions, the information, and the connections. That is the basis of our application, because as we move into this new age, it isn't how do I build a particular thing, it's what things go into this that need to be considered that I can then articulate to Claude that it will then build. So we're just going to be taking a look at that, using some prompts to then try and build that two-sided marketplace. So if you're not familiar with Xano, Xano is going to be our platform that handles the business logic, the databases, basically everything, including the front end hosting. And I want to be able to switch over. You can still see my screen if I switch over. Is that right? Oops. want to switch over, not
Yep.
necessarily to my full screen. I want to actually just go right to another tab here.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, fantastic. We're going to be in this platform here, and I just want to go through very quickly what this platform is going to look like and how we're going to navigate through it. We have our database, which is going to hold all of our data. We're going to have our API groups, which is going to essentially be how this application communicates, not only with itself, but with the front end as well. And then we'll also be taking a look at Xano's static hosting in just a little bit. So we have a couple different things that we'll be dealing with inside Xano, but I want to make sure that the platform, at least we can see it before we just start building. This is the interface. This is how all of our information is going to, well, where it's going to exist. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started by first building. We're going to describe what we want. We're then going to watch it be built inside Cursor. We're going to go ahead and test it inside Xano, and then we're going to refine as needed. Hopefully we don't have to do any, true refinement. Hopefully we're able to do what everyone's calling one shots, where we put in the prompt and then one shot the output so we don't have to change anything. But we'll see as we go. But first, what are app members? So this is kind of the basis of where I would start with my development is what is my application? What's the foundation of my application? What data am I going to be dealing with? And so we uncovered just briefly all of those different buckets, the people, the data, all of those kinds of different things. And so here, this is going to be our prompt. This is how I'm going to start off this build, at least with this prompt. So I'm telling Claude what to remember. This is the foundation of our application. Now, can you see my screen still as I switch over to Cursor?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. I want to make this big for us. So if you can't see it, please let me know. Otherwise, here inside Cursor, I've created a new project. So I've gone to my file explorer, new folder and everything. And then I've also connected my Xano account. So we're not going to go super into depth about how we do this. There's just an extension allowing me to go ahead and sign in. So if you're creating with Xano, you can very easily sign in. And so now I have my platforms connected. That's Claude, and that's going to be Xano. So that workspace that you had seen just a second ago inside Xano, that's now going to be, well, communicated with here. So getting started in my chat, I'm just going to go ahead and throw this in here. Now, what is actually being said? I want my people, I want my providers, and I'm also saying like the type of schema that I want as well. Saying this is how I see it to be, the people are going to have emails and passwords, and this makes sense, but we're still going to want to go ahead and articulate this. The providers, what are they saving? That's their bio, how much they charge per hour, the customers, their preferred payment methods, so on and so forth. So I'm going through this entire application here and all of the different components and saying, well, this is how I envision it being built. Now, this isn't the only way that you need to go about building inside or with AI. This is just a good starting point. You can always ask questions as well to Claude to figure out the best way to build it. We'll go ahead and just send this through, and now it's going to think. I am going to be using Opus 4.6 for this, by the way. And, well, it has all of the information inside my workspace here to know exactly how to build it. So if there are any questions that are coming up about how does it know to build in XanoScript, there's going to be docs and a bunch of information here that exists so that Claude knows exactly how to do that.
So for the 23% beginners in here who maybe have never used Cursor before, maybe they've used something like Lovable, which is in the browser and
Sure.
looks a bit less intimidating than the Cursor interface. And they're probably wondering how Xano relates to stuff like Lovable. Would you be able to give kind of an overall kind of explanation of how this all fits together? Because obviously Xano is one way you can deploy your app and build, but there are other options as well that people might have heard of. So when would you choose one over the other? And yeah, any kind of background information.
Yeah, great question. Lovable's awesome for that front end building. And I know that they've released some backend cloud infrastructure to allow for like some kind of backend, but Lovable definitely broke into the scene because you could start building that front end really easily. Xano takes the other approach that we focus more on the backend. So we're kind of like Lovable for the backend, where if you have a particular idea that's going to be complex or you just need to hold data on the backend, well, that's what Xano's really good for. So you can combine them, of course, but here we're actually just going to be focusing primarily on Xano. So Xano also being that front end host as well. But Xano did start off as primarily the back end, just as Lovable started off as primarily a front end builder. But they both work together very well. We're just going to be kind of sidestep and Lovable here. They have a very nice intuitive interface. We're just going to be looking more like the technical side here, if you will.
Someone said, where are all the files coming from? Do you have a start? Do you have starter projects? So, did you already have any files in this folder before you put this prompt in?
Yeah, good question. So as I go through my setup, what I do is I click my I want to, am I selected on the screen? So I have my settings up here. I would go to Xano and I would log in. So logging into Xano through this plugin, it's going to then pull in all of my data, including all of my folders over here, including the docs. So the docs are kind of the source here. All of the docs have all of the information as to how that code is going to be generated. So it's not looking at any example projects. We're starting off just from scratch, and it's still able to come up with everything that it needs. We could,
And Anthony said,
yeah.
is XanoScript still in beta or beta?
Well, we're always making changes to it, and we're coming to a point where very soon it's going to be solidified. It definitely started off with a lot more, it was more nebulous. Things were changing all of the time. So that beta tag was definitely very appropriate. I know that we're still definitely making changes and coming to where it is at a point where it's completely solidified. But I would have to, are we still in beta? I don't believe so. But of course, I'll hear from management later and they'll say we're still in beta. But yeah, at the moment, does everything that I needed to do without having to worry, especially with Opus point 6, or Opus 4.6, excuse me. Um, in terms of just, fluidity and picking up on all of the different kinds of, syntax and so on and so forth, I'm hardly ever let down by Opus 4.6. And in addition to that, if any changes are made on the Xano platform, we wouldn't do anything to your project. Everything that we change is going to make sure that we aren't affecting you and your projects.
Another question. Why do we use Cursor instead of Claude Code?
Great question. Cloud Code's awesome. Cursor is going to allow us to see things visually, at least for now. So in this one, we're just wanting to see how things are being built, the file directory, the structures. Cloud Code is going to kind of abstract that, just being that terminal interface where we see it scroll by. So for here specifically, we're going to be using Cursor, but maybe in the future we do use Cloud Code.
Yeah, so I've done a couple of Claude Code workshops, or other like I've done live builds with Claude Code, and I've run it in my terminal, and people are like, they're just watching kind of words fly by on the screen, and they're like, when do we get to see the app? And
Yeah.
you don't really see it until you finally run the dev server right at the end, and you don't see any of the code either, which you may not want to see, but it is quite interesting in Cursor
Yeah.
to be able to see the files that it is creating and see all the code it's writing, even if you don't understand any of it, which I don't. Um,
I mean, it makes you feel like you're involved and you're there, though. So it makes you feel like you're doing stuff. And it's cool to see regardless. It's just like, yeah, this is neat.
yeah, and if you
Uh,
did want to learn code, being able to see the code is step one, I think.
yeah, I mean, it's really helpful. That's the thing with Xano. That's 100% why Xano is so great because it does let you see the code. It's going to be visual, of course. You have the ability to see the Xano script, and I'll show you here in just a little once we actually push the logic. But you have the ability to see it, and it really just helps you visualize and understand how the data is flowing and how things work. So to that point, yeah, being able to see the code is cool and helpful.
Yeah, from my perspective, so I built a lot of apps with Claude Code and a few with Lovable. And the thing is, you don't get any visual representation of your app. It's all in the code. And yes, you can talk to Claude Code, you can talk to Lovable and say, I want it to do this and that. But you can't visually understand your app or really look at the data unless you're using something like Superbase for your backend, in which case you do get some visual representation. Whereas with Xano, it feels like you get that visual layer to how your app works and to all of like the API connections and your data that you wouldn't otherwise get if you were just building purely with something like well, you could be using Cursor, but then using some other database backend and, not being able to visualize anything. It's all kind of lost in the code there. So for visual people, it feels like a really good way to do things.
Yeah, 100%. Amazing way to do things, especially if you're a visual learner. But even if you're just getting started, or even if you're an expert, to be completely honest, it's a great platform to be able to observe and see and kind of like interact with. Um, I tried to use the MCP tool to push these database or these data tables, but it looks like I actually had to use the VS Code extension. So bear with us as we go through these technical growing pains here. I'm looking at the tables that we just created, which is the coolest part about just using natural language to actually get things to work. I didn't have to go ahead and build any of these manually. There wasn't any kind of schema that I had to adjust. Of course, we can in the future, especially if we're noticing things aren't right. But well, these are the tables that we've created. So 6 tables without having to do, anything. And that's the part about it being visual. We get to see them. So amazing. Now we're going to go back into our build here where now it's like, what's next? We've just built our tables. What are we actually doing here with these tables? And so this is what we're seeing. We're seeing our users, our provided profiles, the customers, everything here, and we want to make sure that it's linked up properly. Now, what we can do, see, I want to move this. We can actually look at these table relationships as well, just to see how things are going to be related. It looks like a lot of things are going to be related to the user. This payment, it looks like maybe it's not linked to the booking ID quite like we want it to. So I'm just going to go in here. I'm going to click on my booking ID. I'm going to right click on here. And all I'm going to do is link this table to the actual booking. So now we should have this ID here. We might run into some small technical hiccups, but we'll move through them. I just want to see if that doesn't look like it did connect, but we will go ahead and proceed just in the sake of time, make sure that things are built. So let's go back here. So, okay, we have our data tables, and then the next part of this, it's actually going to be creating the logic. So once we have our platform that is the basics, what are we dealing with the data here? Now we can actually start dealing with moving that data around. And so we're going to be taking a look at the most basic sign up and login. So most applications have this where you sign up and log in. We're just going to create our own system here. So creating a sign up and login system. So when someone signs up, what's going to happen? And when someone logs in, what's going to happen? That's what we're going to go ahead and articulate here. So the way that I've done this, well, when someone signs up, they give us an email and a password. We're going to go ahead and store this information, create their account. And if they selected provider, they'll be a provider. If they selected customer, they'll be a customer. So this is how it's going to work. We're just going to go ahead and copy this here and go back into our cursor. And what does it say? It says quick fix or enable MCP. Well, I'll have to take a look at that in a second. I should have it already enabled, but okay, great. Here is what we're looking for. We'll go ahead and send it through. So in the same context, we don't need to use the same chat window. We can, of course. I'm just going to keep everything here. And so
So
now maybe go ahead and build.
one question which has been asked twice in the chat is Xano versus Superbase. What's the difference?
Xano for Superbase. Well, Xano is going to be kind of like this self-contained orchestrate. Well, it's going to have the DevOps orchestrated for it. So we don't need to necessarily worry about database pools or connections. We don't have to worry about those kinds of things. Plus, with Superbase, you have row-level security, which is going to be a little different than the way that we're approaching things with our integrated RBAC and the middleware and custom functions that you can build. Superbase has awesome row-level security. It works great, but you're dealing with the actual, well, the code there at that point, and you have to make sure that everything, of course, works and that your users can access things that only they can access, so on and so forth. You're doing it all without this visual interface too. And especially in the age of AI, I understand it's like, well, with AI, I can just have AI build it for me, which is true technically. But it's that visual verification layer that Xano really provides that makes it just that much better, personally for me. Of course, the platforms, they are a database and they handle edge functions, some similar in terms of logic. But when it comes down to the user experience, the DevOps experience, me not having to worry about those things, I choose Xano every time for sure.
So can you explain to someone who doesn't know what DevOps is?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to say it's the scary part of software, but it definitely is the part that's going to take up a lot of time, more so than just actually building. DevOps is going to be the infrastructure. So how your application scales horizontally, vertically. It's going to make sure that, if you're handling 1,000 users at the same time, that the app doesn't crash. And so Xano handles that all for us with auto scaling and all those really cool features. So we don't have to worry about the plumbing and the piping. That's basically it.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like Xano is potentially more beginner friendly. Would you say that?
We're definitely shifting into this beginner friendly, but we also support some really heavy hitters in the enterprise space. So we want to make sure that the platform caters, of course, to everybody. We want to empower everybody to be able to build world-class software. That's just the way it is. And especially in the age of AI, I think that that's even more true. But especially with that visual interface, we really want to let anybody just build. And so I would say yes. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I want to see one thing here. My MCP is working. I know that Claude earlier today was running into some issues, so I'm going to blame some of the issues on Claude. It looks like I'm going to have to continue to use the tool to push these files instead of the MCP. But I will do that. We can see here in the bottom, it says pushing changes to Xano 66%. And again, just as a refresher, we've been building the auth system here. So if we go back into Xano, and we go to our API group, this is where our logic is going to live. We can then see our login, our me, and our sign up. So I built this with just that prompt, and then I've pushed it. Now, it makes sense if we at least attempt to try signing up here. So we'll go ahead and open up this endpoint and click run. And so this is the visual power of Xano. This is why I love Xano, because I get to go in here and just type right in this run and debug that we call it. I get the ability to just see my data work. So I
Yeah,
have to
this is
pick.
cool. As far as I know, you can't do stuff like this in Superbase, like actually see your workflows running and have them visually
Yeah.
shown like that.
Yeah, exactly. And the cool part here is that it works. First off, that's always neat. But we get this timing stack here as well. So we get to see all of the records, all of the data, how it's gone through the system, how long it's taken. So perfect for troubleshooting. Just another thing that Superbase and Xano, there's going to be that difference between. But we do get to see it having worked. So we've signed up, we have this auth token returned, and this auth token is going to be used to make authenticated requests for the user as we proceed. If we go to our database and we go take a look at this user, we can see that I've created me. This is me that I just created from the platform. So it works. And well, perfect. So we've created the tables and we've created the login. Amazing.
Awesome.
Perfect. Yeah, we did just test this so people can sign up. We can test if the people can log in real quick. So what I want to do is I want to go back to my API. I want to go back to my login. Oh, I'm sorry, not login, sign up, because this is where I started. We can see here that this data is going to be stored in memory, so I don't have to retype my crazy super secure password. I can just go ahead and log in here. Make sure that this works for us. If I can type. Perfect. So the login works as well. Now, the people stay logged in part, that's going to be more on the front end as we handle that auth token. So people can sign up and people can log in. And now it's the actual application, the searching and the booking. It is only a two-sided marketplace if there's things to search and book. So that's the next part of this journey. Very similar to how we've already, approached this, which is this is what we're going to be dealing with, this prompt here. So we're creating a way for customers to search for providers. We're letting them filter by these things here, the type of services, the minimum ratings they want, maximum ratings, and then we're showing them certain information. We're going to sort these results, and we should be able to see them easily. So what we're going to do first, create a way for customers to search for providers. I'm just going to go ahead and copy this prompt, and I'm going to bring it back into Cursor. Same context window. So again, I'm going through here describing what I want. I'm not having to think about the syntax or about necessarily even the logic quite yet. What I'm saying is, hey, a two-sided marketplace has two kinds of people, and they should be able to exchange these goods. My users should be able to search for each other. When they search, there should be this kind of criteria. So we're not doing anything with any kind of really like code. It's not very code heavy. It's very thinking heavy. And so this era really it shifts from how do I build something with a particular syntax to how do I build something by thinking about it a particular way.
And for people who are like thinking, oh, we're doing this in, I don't know, they're probably thinking, how do I come up with all these different prompts? How do I know how what I need for my two-sided marketplace? You could just as easily have said, build me a two-sided marketplace, and it would have asked you a few questions. It would have gone into plan mode, and it would have probably come up with very similar answers to the way you're doing it now. Obviously, the best way to do it is to fully understand what you want to build before you start prompting, which is what you're doing, and you're doing it in a very rational, logical way, as you are a seasoned builder. But some people, and it could be fine if you just start with like a one-line prompt, build me a two-sided marketplace to match up, dog walkers with dog owners or something like that, and it would know what to do. Like AI is pretty good and it's pretty good at planning as well. But for the sake of this tutorial, it's way better to do it in a logical way and do it step by step, because then otherwise you just one shot the whole thing and nobody really learns anything.
Oh, it's done. Yay. What do we do? Well, we
Yeah,
built something. What
exactly.
do we learn? Well, those lessons come when the project's been launched and then things start breaking. So the idea here is that hopefully if we were to launch this, things wouldn't start breaking. Of course, we have a bunch of tests that we can run, but yeah, there's so many different ways to cut the cake, as I always say. There's so many different ways to actually solve the problems that we're running into. And so for the sake of this, yeah, I just want to break it down into these chunks so that we can kind of see how things are working. Uh,
Vivian said, how do you test the results from Cursor? Are there any automations available regarding like making sure things work instead of trusting Cursor that it was all good and secure?
Yeah, fair point. Yeah, 100%. So a couple different ways to go about that. You can use Cursor to build these test suites for you, or even inside Xano, you can go ahead and build tests yourself. We have our workflow tests and our unit tests. So there's a couple different ways to go about this, or at least testing. My favorite, which is sort of like a combination of using what I had said, but also includes me. So I'll go through, I'll be clicking buttons, making sure things work. I am a user as much as my other users. Well, at least in this particular scenario, I'll be, a user. So a great question, though. Yeah, 100%. Okay, so we've built the search aspect here. Now, of course, search only matters so much if we have data. At the moment, we don't. So we're just going to continue to go ahead and create what's next. And so customers can search for a service. That's exciting, but now we need to let them book a service. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing next. We're just going through mentally here the flow of the application. So what exactly is happening? We're building the data. We're manipulating the data so users can log in. Well, once users are logged in, what can they do? They should be able to search. And then once they search, they should be able to book. So that's what we're doing here. The customer picks which provider they want, start date and end date and time. We're going to be dealing with a like a date picker. So it's going to be a bit of like a chunk of time here. This can be changed at any point for whatever makes sense for you. So maybe we want them only to schedule for a whole day or maybe only an hour of a day. So the system checks, does this provider exist? Is this state in the future? Because we can't book in the past. It's going to be doing things here that make sense to us, but we're still going to want to have it written down. So if everything looks good, then we should be able to book, essentially. So we'll go ahead and pass this prompt through. Again, really just thinking about how this application is built and thinking about what's next.
Do you have any thoughts on Cursor versus Windsurf?
I've used Windsurf only a handful of times. It wasn't bad. This was several months ago, though, so it's not like super up to date. I use Cursor a bunch, though. Cursor is one of the tools, one of the IDEs that I use more than probably anything else. It's this and anti-gravity, although definitely I use Cloud Code as well. So I can't say with a whole bunch of confidence how I feel about Windsurf at the moment, but I can say Cursor all the way. I love Cursor.
It's always changing though, isn't it? Like new tools get new features, and suddenly it's the flavor of the month, and it's very hard to
100%.
keep up.
All right, so here's we've created here, and it's letting us know the thing is with your AI development, I love it because it does let us know what's happening at least. So Claude Code, Cursor, Anti-Gravity, you'll have your agent typically tell you what it just built. So it built everything that we had in our prompts. So let me go ahead and just push this back over. I'm going to stage this file and then push it. But now we can go ahead and create a booking. So we have users, we have the ability to search for bookings, we have the ability to create bookings. That's exciting. And well, now we still need to actually get it to work. We've skipped over, well, I don't want to say we've skipped over anything. We'll probably need to come back and refine. So we can go ahead and at least test inside Xano. And then what's next is that front end to actually have things connect to then see it work. But before we have it even on the front end, we can go back into Xano to first, let's create a booking. Now, one of the things is we're going to need a provider ID. So let me go ahead and get a provider ID. We'll just go ahead and create that provider. Now, this is going to be in such a way where, it's actually, I wonder, can we use the MCP tool to create all of this data? So I want to create it, but I still want to go through the booking. I want to show that logically. But the cool thing about this AI development is, well, the fact that it can do a lot for us, including seed our database for us.
Yeah, it's crazy how much time creating test data takes when if you're building it from scratch. It was like always such a lot of work to just put stuff in your database to see what things look like.
You had to get lucky that you found a GitHub repo with like a CSV that had the data and the schema that you needed. I remember the days before AI where trying to find that actual data was definitely tough. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, let's see. It's saying that it's thinking about doing it with a, uh, you know what? Maybe we just need to refresh the MCP. So let me go ahead and try and do that real quick because it keeps on saying that it can't find it, and I just don't believe it.
Yeah, I use MCPs a lot. For anyone that doesn't know, MCP is basically just a really simple way for AI to interact with a third party application or service. And it just means you can chat to your AI and it can do whatever you want it to do on that third party service. But I do find that they are constantly requiring re-authentication or something goes wrong. They're not rock solid in terms of, and that might be something I'm doing wrong, or maybe like the tokens just expire very quickly, but they are a bit annoying, especially when you have like loads of different accounts for different projects and they're all set up by MCPs and you've got to keep logging in and out of each one. That's a bit of a
Yeah,
nightmare.
that could definitely be a challenge when you have to juggle all of them. Xano does a pretty good job. I'm gonna blame Claude here. I think it's probably Claude that's doing something. I use anti-gravity on my other computer as well, and I have to refresh that a bunch too. So I understand what you're saying. But the cool part is, at least with Xano, we're able to see it do everything that that we were going to do, but it does it with the MCP tool. We've been seeing it build the application. Now it's seeding the application. And it's able to push the data too, so we don't have to use any kind of plugin. But another really cool thing about this, well, apart from, of course, the data just randomly showing up, which is very neat. In the future, which we're not covering today, but in the future, you can explore building an MCP server with Xano as well. So if your application, you want to extend it for agentic abilities, Xano allows you to build an MCP server. So it's very, very cool.
That is cool.
Um, yeah, so we get to see it looks like it built this provider profile for us as too. So the customers are going to have their own customer profiles. The provider profiles, they'll have their, or I should say the providers, they'll have their own profiles and so on and so forth. So it looks like we're getting close to having an application with a bunch of data. That was my muscle memory, clicking on AI and then going to agents, but I actually just want to go here to booking create because now I want to try and create a booking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find myself and I need to find a provider ID, which is one of those things where I did just kind of skip over. My provider ID I believe it should be coming from my provider profile table. So I'm going to select ID number 2 here. Great. And now we need a date. So let's say, let's March 3rd for us. Let's see if this works. It might need a Unix timestamp because and we did specify in the prompt that we were looking for day and time. So let's pass this through. We need our token. You cannot book in the past. Please pick something in the future. And so I'm wondering if I again just need a Unix timestamp. They're gonna book in the past, please. Okay, so I do need a Unix timestamp. I'm just gonna ask Claude, can you give me a Unix timestamp for tomorrow at 6 p.m. and then I'll specify MST. So a couple different ways to do this. You could go to Google, you could search for this, or you could, of course, ask Claude. I'm just gonna go ahead and ask Claude. Now we should be able to pass these values in.
Working with dates and times is notoriously difficult in software development, and even with AI, it's the last thing
Saying
that
that
it
I'm
almost
still
always
stuck.
gets wrong, in my experience.
Yeah, so it says that I'm still obviously looking for something in the past, unless, of course, it's living in the future. This should be for tomorrow, March 4th, in the Unix time. So I'm just going to simply troubleshoot here. I'm saying in my booking, you know what we can do? I actually think that we should just change the booking entirely to be just a date. So for the booking entirely, let's refine this and remove the time selector. We should say the user should only pass in a date. This is how I tend to troubleshoot. So I like lists. So one on the booking, and I'll say post/booking here. It says that I'm stuck in the past and that I can't schedule anything. And then I'll say, please help fix. I will actually, please help identify and fix. I found that specifying, identifying, and then fixing helps reduce hallucinations. I'm not saying that it always does it, but I found that it works at least.
Sam
So
said
let's
in the
see.
chat, everybody knows time zones are a pain to handle. That's never a
Time
truer
zones
word
are.
spoken. Yeah.
Yes.
Well done you for attempting to tackle this on a live build.
Yeah, try and knock on wood.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always a bit of a challenge when you have Unix timestamps, of course. Not that that's an impossibility. That's the way the internet kind of runs, how most applications were using Unix. But it's just a string of numbers. So trying to identify what those string of numbers are to a human readable format live is a little tricky, sure. Yeah, that's a little tricky.
Yeah, I've definitely had AI recently assuring me that it was a Tuesday when it was in fact a Wednesday, and telling me that a date in the future was definitely already passed and all this stuff. And despite me giving evidence to the contrary, it still insisted it was right
Yeah, it's
until
one of those things.
eventually it's like, oh no, sorry. Of course you are absolutely right. But
Always.
yeah, it's always so confident.
Saying start time is greater than now. If the start time is greater than that now, well, my start time, I'm pretty sure. Let's just go ahead and put this number up there too, and then click run. Oh, but the end time must be after. So classic. Let's just increase this number here and click run. And now you can't look in the past. Yeah, so we're gonna see if our friend here can help with this. Now, again, I'm gonna probably blame a little bit on Claude, just being that, you had said that there was an outage earlier. It looks like it's being a little slow to get things done.
Yeah, there was a nightmare. I don't know how long it lasted for, but it felt like at least an hour. And then they were having issues with their models and their API and Claude code and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, that tends to happen. I opened up a new chat so that it should be a little a little faster here for us. I think that that's one of the things with context window. It has to compact, it has to read everything else that had previously been sent. And so it can get a little slow there, but we'll see. Hopefully, fingers crossed that this improves just a little bit here. In the meantime, one of the things that we can do, I suppose, is just change this to a date. So what we can at least attempt to do is change the start time and end time to dates. Now I'm going to be kind of just experimenting here. If I'm faster than the AI, which this needs to be end date, that'll be awesome. So I just want to make sure that we can go ahead and pass through this logic. So for the time being here, I'm going to turn off those preconditions, but then it's going to be this create booking where we need to go ahead and specify. It looks like, let's see here, start time. It's going to need to be a timestamp, and I added these dates here rambunctiously. Let's do this where I'm going to get rid of these inputs. And I'm at least going to attempt that clicking run, and the provider doesn't exist. So my provider ID of 2. Now, this is why I like the visual bit here, because I get to see all of the data as it is. So provider ID of 2, that's working the way that we want. Does my user ID of 2 not exist? Well, that'll probably do it here. So we're going to go back. We're going to go to our logic, and we're going to replace 2 with 3. To be looking at the actual user here. Okay, so we were able to identify a couple hiccups. We don't want to necessarily use the timestamp as it is right now. It looks like it's coming through and it is fixing some stuff for us, fixing the timestamp to just be a date. Perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and keep this stuff. Let's keep this file. And I'm going to say push for me, please.
So that was kind of some classic debugging there. That was a very good demonstration of like, yeah, if you can debug something like that, which basically, you don't have to understand code, you just have to understand what it's trying to do, go look in a different table, notice that something is different, something's not matching up, and in the end you only had to replace one number with another number and it works. I think that's like the extent of probably the most challenging thing that you have with building in 2026 is doing stuff like that. So if you can get your head around things like that, it's a good sign, I think.
Well, one of the cooler parts too is that, as you had said, we don't need to know the code. Inside Xano, we get these error messages that pop up that we can then read. But we also have this debugger here to see where exactly it fails. So there's a couple different ways to go about this, but yeah, in the agentic era, troubleshooting it is less about that code, more about, okay, well, what's happening on screen? How can I use Claude to help me? And if not, do I have a visual interface to be able to do so?
Yeah.
Um, Let's see, since you've asked me to push, I'll proceed with both the table schema updates and the API update now. So it's going to go ahead and change that. We're just on the fly, making sure that we're not hopefully running into any future issues with the time, but instead just using dates. That's funny because it's one of the things that I pointed out in the prompt too. I said, well, but okay, so remove the start time index. It's doing all of these things to make sure that it doesn't break everything for us. I think that's there's all of the horror stories of Claude going through and deleting the database and ruining your application. I can say, as I've been building in Xano pretty diligently over the past, well, since we've had this since about October, I haven't once ran into any data deletion, say, that you would normally if you had like Claude just on a Superbase instance. With Xano, I just haven't noticed that. It hasn't done it for me. But okay, good news is that these things have been updated. So we can go back and take a look, make sure that our booking date, so we've changed it to a booking date, no longer the start and the stop time. So with that time issue out of the way, hopefully we just move forward. Okay, now what's next? Things have been built for us. We still wanted to test. We were able to get a successful booking, but I think that probably truly the best way to test is going to be connecting everything together. Now, there's going to be a couple endpoints that I imagine here that we're going to want to have taken care of. Let's see. So we can, I think that we probably do get into the payments now. I know that testing is definitely on my mind. I want to build that front end, but before we do that, we do want to go ahead and connect the payments. And so this is kind of the bread and butter of the two-sided marketplace. You have your users, and then you have the services, and now you have the actual payments as they're made. So what we want to do, and what I already have, is a Stripe account that I've set up. So we just need a couple pieces of information to actually create it. What we're going to do is just take this prompt here. It says when a customer pays, well, what happens when that customer pays? Well, we're going to make sure that that booking exists. If it's not paid already, then we'll process the payment. We're going to be using Stripe. So I'm going to show you two pieces of information from Stripe so that you too can use it as well. But then after the payment starts, we should just be able to save this information, give the customer a confirmation, and change that record. So inside Cursor, I'm just going to go ahead in that context window, just throw in my prompt, say, I want my users to be able to make payments. So now to go ahead and do this. Now I do need to, I want to find, but actually go to Stripe here. There we go. Perfect. I have Stripe. So this is my test account. These are my publishable and secret keys. Typically, you don't want anybody to see the secret key, but you're not going to be able to do anything on my test account, fortunately. But these two pieces of information are going to be really, really important for actually being able to make these payments. And I'm going to be setting them up inside Xano in just a second. Perfect. It looks like we're paying a booking. Now, one of the things that actually happens before we do any of this is I want to articulate here to Claude that I have these environment variables. I have a publishable key and I have a secret key. So let's go ahead and specify I have a secret and a publishable key for Stripe that I will add to my environment variables. Now, I'm going to go and show you what an environment variable is in just a second. But it's a secure way to store this data that we don't want to actually share. So perfect. I'm asking, hey, I have this data. I need to use it. Is this factored in? And it says, yes, we've already factored this in. So the only key needed on the back of the secret key is use server side to authenticate with the Stripe API. Okay. So it's saying to get this working, just go ahead and add this with the name Stripe secret key. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back into Xano. Clicking all these buttons, and go back into Xano. And I'm going to go to my settings here. In my settings, I have my environment variables, and this is a place where I get to store all of my secrets. So my Stripe secret key, I'm just going to go ahead and grab this. I'm going to throw him here. Amazing. And I'm also going to include that publishable. This is just best practice. We want to make sure that what we have, and I know I'm flipping all across the screen. Sorry for that. We just want to make sure that the information that we have that should be secured is secured. And this is the way that we're going to do it inside Xano. This is our secret vault of information. So once I have that, perfect. Okay, cool. So I have those two files added. So let's make sure that this pushed it. I'm just going to go ahead and review here. Okay, let's go back into Xano.
Vivian said, would you use branches?
Sure. Yeah. Branches are definitely super important for environments and just making sure that we're not kind of stepping on our own toes. Branches are super important for, well, honestly, organization and making sure that certain features have the dedicated space so that we don't ruin other features as we're building. In this case, we're not going to be using branches, but branches are awesome. Definitely when it comes to organization and it comes to if you're working with other people, making sure that you guys are keeping your work preserved as it needs to be.
Yeah, personally, I don't really use branches unless I'm working on a project with other people. But I know a lot of people, like to have 5 different Claude agents working on their project at the same time, in which case they probably put them all on separate branches so they don't confuse each other. But my brain is kind of one thing at a time when it comes to at least a single project. So I tend not to use branches very much.
Great. So just confirming that the publishable key isn't needed. We only need that Stripe seeker key. Perfect. But yeah, to that, don't use branches a whole lot unless I'm working with other people. Okay, so we have the payment at least set up. Our logic is set up, and we're going to need to test this. But I think it's going to probably be easier to test this when everything is connected. So that's what we're going to do now. Now we're missing, I believe, just a couple endpoints that Claude's going to need to come back and build for us. Now, what endpoints would those be? We have the create, the pay, and the search. We're probably going to need to, well, I don't see any profile, like edit a profile or anything like that. So that's just another aspect here that we're going to need to create. Now we have seeded all of our data from our database, so it's not going to be as important, but still I'm going to specify that in the prompt. Now I'm opening up my library and I'm going to my static hosting. Nothing exists here at the moment. We're going to go ahead and use static hosting here from Xano to build our front end and to get everything to connect. So this is a lot like that lovable that was mentioned previously, except obviously it's not lovable, it's Xano. And there isn't a crazy kind of UI or a sidebar where you can chat with, at least yet. Right now, we're going to be using Cursor with Claude to connect all of our API endpoints, our database, and then host it here in this particular area. So what I'm going to do to get started, I'm going to go ahead and grab my Swagger documentation. My Swagger documentation lives up here within my API groups. And then I can click this blue button here, which shows me all of, well, my schema. And this is very important and very helpful for a robot, not necessarily me, but Claude can use this. So I'm just going to go ahead and actually what I'll do is I'm going to copy this URL. Copy. Is this the, oh, actually copy link address? That's the one that I want, huh? Okay, so let's create the front end here. So I don't believe that I have a prompt for this bit here, but we can use the pages that we need. So let's go ahead and make sure that we have the pages that we need, of course, and I get to see kind of like an organic how I'm going to prompt Claude. So pages you need. Perfect. This is everything that we need: the sign up, the search page, the provider profile, the booking form, payment page, and the dashboard. I'm going to want to grab, because I just lost this as I copied it. So I'm going to say, here are my Swagger documentation, my Swagger docs, for being able to integrate the front end with the business logic. So this is going to be the logic for booking and payment. And one of the things that I'll need to do is I will need to go back into Xano to grab my authentication for my user, or I should say my Swagger for my users. So I'll do the same thing, Swagger docs, I'll grab here, copy that link address, and go back into Cursor and say, this is for the auth. Now, what I want to also do is ensure that it knows, and I want to be able to grab my URL. So let me go ahead and there's a bunch of different ways to grab the URL. Actually, I've just minimized my browser to grab this. So this is the base URL for the Xano workspace. Let's make sure, let's just connect everything. So this works. And I like Tailwind. Makes it pretty. So I'm just going to say, please use Tailwind for CSS. And I'm going to specify, please use HTML and JavaScript. There's a bunch of different frameworks like React that you can use. I'm just going to keep it for this demo very simple. So what have I done with this prompt? I've taken my logic endpoints. I've said, this is how you will build them. I've taken it and I've given it my Swagger documentation for both the business and the authentication. I've grabbed the URL from my Xano workspace and said, this is the main URL to use. So when you're connecting everything, and I've also specified what kind of style I want. I want it with Tailwind, but I also want it to be simple and lightweight, HTML, CSS, no other kinds of libraries or frameworks.
So do you think that a lot of people, I think, would be accustomed to maybe trying Lovable and things like that, and where it really builds the front end of the app first, and you get to see everything appearing on the page, and then it goes and does the logic and stuff. Do you think there is an advantage to doing it this way, which is to do the database first and then the app logic, and then finally get it to kind of put the front end UI on top of that?
Well, good question. I think that it depends on who you are as a person. Now, if you're a visual learner, it probably will make sense to create your front end and then say, hey, you know what? When I click this button, this should happen, and things along those lines. So that lovable angle, it makes sense to kind of like see your vision created real time and then build the back end there. Versus if you're like a backend engineer, typically you're thinking of how the data works and how the systems work. So when it really comes down to how to build, whether you're building front end first or back end first, I think it's going to come down to what you're most comfortable with. There is an advantage, but I will say though, there is an advantage of having the front end first because then you get to see, like, again, like, when I click this button, this should happen. But I like the magic of being able to create on the back end and then seeing the front end come to be just based off of the logic and how things should interact there. So just to summarize, it depends on who you are. There is an advantage, though, for sure, to be able to have something to visualize. It just depends on how you visualize it.
And so you had to give it uh, all of those URLs and the documentation. If you had just said build the front end, would it have had enough information to find that documentation itself and the URLs?
Yeah, great question. I think so. A lot of what I do comes from muscle memory and just learned experiences. Um, so you do have the ability to just very loosely say, build this for me, and then it will build it for you. But I found that it doesn't matter the model that you're using. If you can articulate with clarity, what you're looking for, it'll probably end up better regardless versus just a loose prompt. And then you're at the mercy of Claude trying to interpret exactly what you're saying. But yeah, you probably absolutely could just be like, build it for me, and it would.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about these kind of live builds is you have to be perhaps more specific than you would be normally because you don't want to be faffing around in the weeds for ages. Whereas, yeah, quite often in real life, you'd be like, oh, just do this, and then it might get it wrong the first time, and then you go back and get it to do it again. But yeah, you have to be try and be more efficient. That's why when I was doing some live builds, I yeah started out with a massive prompt that was all pre-prepared with all the stack and everything that I wanted it to use because I wanted it to do the build that I was expecting live. But then a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, that's already too complicated because like I don't understand your prompt and I don't know what any of those frameworks are and everything like that." And the point, so for the next one, I was just like, "Okay, I'm just going to do a one-line prompt and we're going to see what happens." But it's harder to teach then because you actually have no idea what it's going to do and what stack it's going to use. And as a teacher, you have less control. But as an observer, you kind of get the most authentic experience because it's just on the fly. That's why teaching AI
100%.
is difficult.
Yeah, that's why, when I started this, it was less like all right, how are we going to do this? And more of like, okay, how are we going to think about thinking? Because that's really, I think, like the new age of development. It's everybody can build everything. It's just what's the best way? What makes the most amount of sense? And yeah, how do you learn that? So it just falls back to that idea of like, okay, how do we think about this? And I think then it builds upon itself.
Yeah, a lot of folks, really excited to design their apps in Figma and then get that pixel perfect design and turn it into a coded app. Whereas, yeah, I'm not very good at design. So the thought of starting out in Figma is you just take too long. So I'd rather get it to just do whatever. And I'm always happy with the design pretty much. I'm not that fussy, but I understand that a lot of people do like good design and respect them.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I mean, rectangles are rectangles. Some people just make rectangles look better than others. So,
Yeah, they really do.
yeah, I love it because Claude, there's also a personality between Claude and ChatGPT, where the styles as well, even if you specify the same thing, will be just wildly different. So design is just, yeah.
Yeah,
something
it's
from world.
difficult. And yeah, AI is not very good at original design anyway. But yeah, uh, very jealous of the people that can come up with beautiful design that doesn't look just like everything else.
I've been known to, as I just get started, especially true in the bubble days and even before that, where things did need to look pretty, I would very sincerely just have a div or a container that would have a black border, and that would be it. Everything, there would be no styled texts. There would just be black, boxes everywhere, and that would be like, okay, eventually that will be pretty. But yeah,
Yeah, and
that's why I think backend is fun because there's no rectangles I need to make pretty.
some people have websites that do just have black and white and boxes and they somehow make it look really good. But if I try and do it, it just looks like really basic. Very subtle
I've been there.
differences.
Yep, I resonate with that deeply. That's so funny. 100%. Yep. Now we're almost there. It's almost built everything. So far, it's been building a lot of the logic, a lot of the JavaScript, a lot of the functionality. And
Can
then
you
we
show
have
us the
our index
file
as well.
tree so we can see like all the different files it's making?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go ahead and take a look. So pretty simple so far. We have our API JavaScript file, we have our app JavaScript file, and then we have our index. So our index is going to be kind of this, it looks like a one-page application here, where this app JavaScript file is going to be responsible for actually rendering the CSS and making sure that the logic flows. And then we lastly have our API JavaScript file, where this is going to be pulling in all of the data and everything else from, well, the Xano workspace.
So if all apps were just three files like that, I think I would be able to learn to code. I would be able to learn three files as long as they're not too big.
100%. Yeah, it makes it simple. Apart from like a React app where you do have all of the different folders and all of the different things that go into it. Let's see. So I want to make sure it looks like it is working. It sent the base 64 files over to our static hosting. So if we go back into Xano, we go to our library and our static hosting. I think it might still be in that process where it's sending everything through, but it does look like it is attempting it here. Um, Let me go ahead and I will say continue just in the event that things aren't working. Well, it looks like it's queued, so it must still be thinking. I really don't want to get in the way of it at this very moment. Give it a
So
couple more seconds.
do you have your cursor set to not ask you permissions and stuff for everything? Because it hasn't really asked you anything, has it?
Occasionally it does, but those are more of like the destructive things, like hey, we're gonna remove this column. Would you like me to? Otherwise, yeah, I try to have it just build, just to move through and move forward. Yeah, but it depends. I like to use the plan mode. In this case, we haven't used the plan mode. Where typically with that plan mode, it'll come to me with a plan and it'll say, hey, this is what we have. Are you all right with this? And this is when I typically go through and I'd read everything and make sure that I am okay with well, what it's building. There have been a couple times where I've been like, well, maybe we shouldn't do that because I don't like the way that you're thinking about removing this entire table that we need. And there's the oversight is still absolutely important and necessary in the agentic era. So I would advise anybody to still have it ask you questions, but to with discretion. Some things, especially like style and like CSS, as we're building things, making it pretty, probably don't need a whole lot of question answer asks. But when it comes to like the more like destructive things like the tables being reconfigured and whatnot, I would always have it ask.
Yeah, I've so far not had any issues with tables being destroyed, but yeah, I think best practice is generally not to have an MCP connected to your live production database because that gives your AI the ability to just delete a load of data whenever it feels like it.
Yeah. Yeah, don't do that. You'll be a Reddit post, you'll have, oh, I deleted my application. Don't, yeah, no.
Yeah.
Now, I want to show, of course, the front end and everything here working. And it doesn't look like it wants to actively build for us, which is a shame.
Yeah.
Well, I should say it is actively building for us. It doesn't want to do it quickly, is what I'm saying here. I'm
Mm.
going to try one thing where I'm going to upload static files here manually through the plugin. We'll see if this works. Uploading static content to development. So maybe in just a second it will.
Yeah, it always
Putting
makes me nervous when the AI stops like talking and seems to be thinking for a long time. Because usually it gives you like a constant feed of what it's doing.
Yeah, right. I think it just did it though. Perfect. Okay, so it did. It looks like maybe the plugin was necessary via that or instead of the MCP. So we're going to click this, and we're using Tailwind. This is a pretty simple system, as you can see here. We have the ability to be as artistic or as not as we want. You know, when it comes to that prompt, we can have a bigger landing page with graphics and cool explosions or whatever you have. But in this case, keeping it pretty simple. I'm just going to go ahead and log in real quick. If I can remember, was it
Mm.
oh man, I don't. Yeah, it's this is a test password 123 or something. But what I'm going to do real quick, I'm just going to do something, make myself another super secure password so I can just log in.
Hey.
Perfect. Yeah, this is awesome. So now we get to well book if we so choose. And so we'll go ahead and click on this. Mike, rating of 4.9, a booking of 50. When am I going to be booking Mike here? So we'll say here we'll book now. Not a problem that it can't find this. Let's just go ahead and make sure that we can fix this. I know that we're running up on time, so I want to do this quick, but I'm going to go into Cursor. I'm going to open up a new chat. I'm going to say this error happens when I try to click book. And then I want to, this is what I like to do as well. I've been doing a lot of typing, but one of the things that I tend to do a lot is take screenshots. So I'll take a picture of my environment variable here. And then back inside Cursor, I'll just drag it. Say, this has been added to my environment variables inside Xano.
Do you need a separate client key from Stripe because
The
you're trying to connect two types of you're getting one person to buy from another rather than getting people to just buy from you?
Oh, when it comes to that's a very great point to bring up. Yeah, so when we're doing a two-sided marketplace, especially in Stripe, you are going to want to have the connected accounts, I believe is what we call them, or the marketplace accounts. This is going to be, well, let's see. I don't think that we're going to have enough time to set that up, to be completely honest. But traditionally, yes, you would have it to where, do I have my Stripe?
Yeah, I seem to recall that that's a bit of a pain to.
Yeah, and you raise a
So
good
it's like
point.
Stripe Connect or something.
Exactly. Yeah, this is the Stripe Connect. Which, as you mentioned, is definitely important. Now, here's the cool thing about what we're doing versus the Stripe Connect. When it comes to that kind of this or that, they're fairly similar. Now, with the setup process, we're going through this payment bit here where it's asking us for a client secret key. The only real difference is that your individuals, well, we'd need to pass particular parameters and metadata through. Otherwise, it should be relatively similar. There's a bunch of YouTube tutorials or video tutorials, especially some that we have as well. So it exists as how to do it and what to do. But for this particular example, we're just going to make sure that we have just one key, make sure that that Stripe transaction can actually go through. Let's see. So it says that it found us a couple issues, and ultimately, this is kind of the back and forth. This is the troubleshooting now that we'll go ahead and fix. And so these are the last 5% of the build takes the longest. The first 95, you can get that done very quick, but it's that last 5% where you're making sure everything works and testing everything. That's that last little bit where it does get just, a little longer.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think this is the skill of today. This is the bit that sets people apart from the ones that are not going to be able to develop software. You need to recognize that these issues are going to come up. Like, I've never built an app that had any complexity that didn't have issues like this. And you just, even if you've never heard of Stripe Connect or you don't understand any of the errors, you just have to kind of push through them. And sometimes it can take a whole day just to solve one simple thing. Well, with these days, to be fair, it rarely takes a day. It used to take a day to solve something simple, and now it's just a case of you keep asking AI and to give it as much information as you can, copy and paste all of the errors you get, screenshot everything, and then all of a sudden it'll be like, ah, this is the actual problem, and then it'll just fix it.
Yeah.
At least that's my
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, no, I mean, shared experience. It's definitely a very similar. Okay, so it's saying that it's going to update that value, and then we're going to also need to make sure that we push the change for the front end. Just want to double check here. Still has that placeholder, it says, for the front end. So it's been updated. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and upload that static file yet again. And then hopefully, fingers crossed, that's been fixed as it's actively updating the backend logic. Oh, well, it's competing against me. Um, see, this didn't work last time, so I want to go ahead and click stop here and wait for, well, we can actually just go back into Xano. Let's go to our static hosting again. And perfect, yeah, it already did push. So let's click on this guy. I'm still signed in, and I am going to refresh this just a couple times, make sure that it clears any cookies or any cache. But from here, we can find our provider. Let's see if Mike allows us to book with him again. This provider is already booked on that date. It's probably in a dry state. So let's try another. Perfect. Okay, cool. So what we now need the ability to do is actually pay. Now, I'm seeing something here where it doesn't actually let me type anything in. So this is like a front end issue. This fortunately isn't anything related to Xano, but I can't type. Invalid value element should have a mounted payment element or express. Okay, so I've taken a picture or I've taken a screenshot of this and I've posted it in chat. So now it's just going to tell me here the next part. Now, just as a clear, kind of just boundary, this is going to be Stripe more than it is going to be Xano. With Xano, that backend application facilitating the connections between everything, perfect. It looks like that's working the way that we want to. The way, or what isn't exactly doing what we want to is that Stripe connectivity with, well, the front end, which is one of those things where as we're building using Claude 4.6, we're trying to make it work. So that's what we're dealing with here.
I mean, I've never actually, well, not recently, I've never really tried to implement Stripe without just using their kind of portal thing that just go automatically goes full screen. You like fire it up and you don't have to do any of the interface for putting in card details and stuff like that.
Yeah, so this is like another thing that I like to do is open up the console or the browser to see. And it looks like if we just refresh momentarily, we can see it try to load, but it looks like all of this comes here. So I'm just going to go ahead and take all of my error messages. As I tend to do, I open up my browser, my console, all of my error messages, and I'll send them through. It says, oh, well, the error is clear. Well, if I read, yes, but fortunately, Claude can read for us. So let's make sure that we're on the most recent. Let's refresh this one more time here. No, it looks like, yeah, it is the most recent. So we're just going to have, again, Claude update that static build, and it looks like it's updating now.
Yeah,
Just going
so
to
for
wait a
anyone
couple minutes.
who doesn't know, like if you right click on any website and choose inspect from the menu, you get like this kind of scary looking thing where you can see all of the elements on the page and you can see all of the errors that are coming up and you can see all of the network traffic. And it's really useful when you are building apps when stuff doesn't work. You can just copy anything that is in red that looks like it's going wrong and paste it into your AI. And it gives it so much more information. And you can also, certainly in Claude Code, you can use, there's a couple of ways of getting it to open up a browser and inspect the page itself, and it can get all of the errors. And it really helps it to debug because, yeah, again, that is like one of the key skills you need to be able to build software is just knowing how to help the AI debug and where you can give it enough information and connect it to enough things so that it can easily debug its own issues. And so learning how to inspect a page, which Cam has just demonstrated, is like a really good skill.
Yeah, again, just falling back to the idea of thinking, because it extends to this as well. Just as you had said, what are all of the tools and resources that I have to get the AI to help me build? So maybe we have an idea and we're 95% of the way through, and then the last 5%, we run into issues like this. Well, how do we solve them? We take the error message and we provide it to the AI, and then all of the things that go with that. But this is very exciting because it did publish exactly what we're looking for. The next part here is just going to be me filling out a bunch of information. I'm using tests or Stripe's test data. So that's 424242. We'll go ahead and click Pay Now. So payment successful, view my dashboard. Let's see if the bookings work. The bookings don't work, which is not necessarily exactly what we're looking for here, but this is still on the topic of just troubleshooting. So after I make a payment, the booking doesn't show up. Why is this? And so I'm going to have this think. I know we're running up on our time here, so I just want to quickly go and look at where this would have happened, right? Because we created that endpoint for our booking create and our booking pay. So we have the ability to look at a request history, and the request history came through. So it does work, the amount, the booking ID, the payment ID, the Stripe, all of these things that we are looking for. And then we can go to our booking mine. Now this is going to be using my auth token, or what we had received when we signed in. And it's not showing me. I'm a provider. That's why. I have a very good feeling that it didn't do that because I am a provider. We can see that it's
Oh,
confirmed for Cameron March 5th, though, with Mike Chen. So it looks like everything is working the way we would want it to, apart from the fact that my role is more than likely wrong here.
so
Let's
that's the
see.
kind of insight that I think comes from experience of building lots of apps.
Yeah, there we go. We have a couple more where with that seed data, it also factors in. Um, so if we refresh, there we go. Now we can see all of our data.
Nice.
So from start to end, it's this, well, how do we think about things? Because now it's less about code and less about syntax and more about, okay, well, this is my idea. How am I going to do it? Also paired with, well, here are the problems and how do I solve them? So that's how you think with Xano and Claude and Cursor.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. And I can't believe just on in the nick of time we got there.
Yeah,
Like,
we did it.
and it
Yes.
works. Yeah. I mean, how long do you think this would have taken, I don't know, 2 years ago?
Oh my goodness. Oh, we'd be meeting two or three more times. Yeah. We'd be meeting two or three more times with 90 minutes for each. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. It is crazy that you can do this in the amount of time you've done it in. Um, and yeah, it's only I
Yeah.
say this has only been possible in the last few months. So
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with especially 4.6. 4.5 was awesome, and I know people love codecs as well, but really with 4.5 and 4.6 just recently, things are it's crazy. We're living in the future.
yeah, we really are. And congrats to everyone that has made it this far in the session. You are, yeah, you're doing good to be sticking around and learning all this stuff. So I just wanted to say some final words. Obviously, thank you so much to Cam for taking us through this. Do check out xano.com because I think it's a really good way of combining the vibe coding that we are seeing that is making it so easy with actually understanding how the apps work and being able to visualize the actual flows and test and debug. I think the people who are actually getting into the weeds and really understanding the software that they're vibe coding are going to be the ones that come out on top in this in these crazy times. And I just wanted to say we have a Create With community, which is both online and real life. Online, we have a Slack group where there's a bunch of non-technical people coming together. We do like bi-weekly office hours calls where we just sit and chat about all this stuff and talk about what we're building, and we show each other. And then we just all learn together, and we have expert AMAs and kind of regular sessions like this, bunch of tool savings and lightning lessons. So if you're interested, I'm going to delete this part from the recording. So if you use the code, you will get 50% off your first year of membership. So you go to createwith.com/join to read more, and we would love to see you there. It's a super friendly and inviting space to be in. And yeah, otherwise, we've got another one of these webinars coming up in a couple of weeks, all about OpenClaw. So if that's something that interests you, I know it certainly interests me, then please come along. The date and the information is on our Luma calendar. But yeah, that's all from me. And thank you again, Cam, for doing that amazing live session.
Thank you. Absolutely. This was a pleasure. Thank you very much.